Probably the most dangerous and testing reply is c5, known as Sicilian defense. And it is one of the most complex opening, and because there are many variation and sub-variation exist, sometimes it is very difficult to cope up with the theory, and especially to create your own replica against it. Now the opening system I'm going to recommend in this video not only can be applied to any Sicilians, but the best part I found about it, it's very flexible and white can choose which side he wants to play, like king side, queen side, or in the center. The good news is there is no clear refutation of this line, so you can use it on a regular basis or a complete surprise weapon in the tournament practice. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. First, I'm going to illustrate the structure of this opening, and then we will see 3 different games on different sides of the board, which will give you a broad idea how you can play it confidently. The second move white is going to play is c4, and this opening is based on controlling the d5 square, as we all know that all the Sicilian players want to achieve this thematic d5 break, which we are going to prevent throughout the game. Now, I'm going to show you only white move, which will give you where exactly the pieces are belong, and then what is the middle game plan. Here, most likely, we are going to continue with knight to c3, controlling the d5 square more. Then comes the fourth piece which controls the d5 square, namely g3 and bishop to g2. And after that, the rest of the army develop like this. We are going to play d3, liberating the other bishop. Then comes knight g to e2. Afterwards comes a very important point. If your opponent has played the move knight to f6, then you really don't want to play bishop to e3 immediately, as it can be kicked away with knight to g4. So in that case, white should play this prophylactic move h3 in order to play the move bishop to e3 next, or to castle on the king side. Well, you can choose either of the move, but I like to remain very flexible, so the setup I'm going to recommend start with bishop to e3. Afterwards, our queen will go on to the d2 square. So in the case where black has fianchetto, his bishop, this queen bishop battery is very useful to exchange the dark square bishop. Well, afterwards, most likely white is going to castle on the king side. And as the opening stage is finished, as 2 rooks are connected and our king is safe, now comes the big question, what we are going to do in the middle game. Well, here I have highlighted 3 different plans, and depending on your preferences, you can play it in the game. If you like to attack on the king side, then the simplest plan is you go ahead with the move f4, g4, coming forward with your pawn on the king side, followed by knight to g3, and a good king side attack. Many times what will happen is black is not going to be careful against this opening, as this is very rare gift. So they lose the control on the d4 square, and that's where you have to be very alert. White is going to achieve the break d4, and then transpose the game in the realms of Marcosi bind. Last but not least, white can also play on the queen side with the moves such as rook to b1, and then a3 and b4, and get a very aggressive play on that side of the board. So that's it guys, that is in the nutshell in terms of opening. If you just look at it for a few times, you will literally memorize this move order, and then you are all set to play this opening with confidence. Well, now I'd like to show you 3 games where we are going to see how white has achieved his trump on 3 different sides of the board. In the first game, I'd like to show you how white can generate a queen side attack. So as I mentioned earlier, the opening goes very smoothly, and in fact very effectively. e4, c5. Do you remember? Yep, the second move, c4, we are going to control on the d5 square. Here, black continues with knight to c6. Afterwards, yep, knight to c3, putting more control on the d5 square. And black continue with one of the most famous setup against this line, namely, start with g6. Okay, no issues, we are going to continue with g3, bishop to g7, bishop to g2. And now black liberates his other bishop with the move d6. Kind of a dragon structure, but it doesn't matter to us, as our piece layout is very much fixed. We are going to continue with knight g to e2, and after the move e6. Yes, white can continue with d3, but in this game, he preferred to castle first, and after the move knight g to e7. d3 is the usual response here, but as we are going to see some queen side action, in this game, white prefer to delay that move, and immediately consider this move, namely, rook to b1, and after castle on the king side. As I mentioned earlier, this effective plan of campaign comes into the picture immediately with a3, b6, and now b4. If black captures on b4, then it will lose the control on the d4 square, and that we are going to see in the next game. But in this game, black wisely avoid the exchange and continue with bishop to b7. Well, that doesn't interrupt our plan. We are going to continue with d3, liberating other bishop, and after knight to d4, which in fact many theory books recommend. The key point you have to remember here that this knight is belong to the e7 square, not on f6, so that's why we don't want to play h3, but instead of that, we are going to continue with bishop to e3, as it cannot be harassed by the knight. Okay, black continue with rook to b8, and now the thematic expansion on the king side, f4, grabbing every single space on the king side. Black continue with f5, so stopping any nuisance on that side of the board. Afterwards, white played a sneaky move, bishop to f2. So if required, then on the right time, white can remove that dangerous knight. Now, black in this game completely unaware of what is happening on the board, and continue with this casual move. And in fact, this is many times happened against this opening. Your opponent doesn't realize the danger in this position, and suddenly, just within 2 to 3 moves, he gets a lost position. In fact, this is the case here, as after the move queen to c8, white give black this ultimate shock, knight captures d4, pawn captures d4, and now knight to b5. And what else? Black is in a huge trouble. Well, he tried the move d5, but after c captures d5, e captures d5, and the move e5, all the threat remain as it is. And on top of everything, after the move queen to d7, white even doesn't bother about taking a pawn. He plonked his knight on a juicy d6 square and telling black, you are in a big trouble, knight. Well, game finished very quickly. Black plays bishop to e8, but after queen to d3, putting pressure on these 2 pawns, black decided to defend on d4, but I think this is a big time inaccuracy, as after bishop captures d5, king to h8, and knight to f7 check, black simply resign in the view of the simple threat, king to g8. And now, there are many good discoveries, but I think the easiest way to play this position is give the discover check with knight to d8, and after king to h8, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and now sting in the tail, bishop captures e5, and if you carefully look at this position, white is clearly 2 pawn up, and black doesn't have a single compensation for it. So I think this model game will give you a good idea how to play this opening aggressively on the queen side. In the second game, we are about to see how white can achieve his thematic break d4 if black is not careful, and if you get a good center, then again, the full point is waiting on the board. e4, c5, c4, controlling the d5 square, knight to c6, knight to c3, g6, g3, bishop to g7, bishop to g2, d6, knight to e2, e6, castle on the king side, and after the move knight g to e7. In the last game, we have looked at the move rook to b1, following up with quick a3 and b4. In this game, white continued with the usual setup, namely d3, and after castle on the king side, now white played the move a3. Okay, a6, rook to b1. It's very important to take that rook out of the diagonal, as sooner or later we are going to continue with b4, and in that case, this move is very handy. Well, black just copied white, he continued with rook to b8, and now white played the move b4, which in fact, this time, black took it. Okay, white recaptures, black plays b5, white took it, black took it, and now compared to the last game, you can see the big difference. There is no control on the d4 square, so that means it allows white to play this expansion move, d4, grabbing tremendous center and the space in the center of the board. Well, black doesn't like it, so he continued with f5, trying to destroy the white wonderful center, but no matter, after e captures f5, rook captures f5, and now the star move, yup, d5, and it is confirmed after this move that black will have a permanent weakness on the d6 square. He captures b5, knight captures b5, king to h8, getting out of any future checks. But white is more than happy as he already created a weakness, so he continued with knight captures e7, knight captures e7, and knight to d4 attacking on the rook. Rook to f7, and now it's just a matter of activating the rest of the army, so white continued with rook to e1, grabbing the open file, queen to f8, hitting on f2, but white defend elegantly with bishop to f4, counter-attacking the loose d6 square. Okay, black continued with bishop to f5, attacking white rook, but white is more than happy as that rook was not doing on d1, so after rook to c1, at least that rook has been activated. Here, black should have played the move rook to b6, but even after that, black's position will remain very passive, so black come up with this idea, rook to d8, defending on d6 and getting out of the pain. But in the meantime, what he forgot is, white can simply take on d5, and now there are 3 attackers on d6, which is not easy to stop. Knight to c8 happened on the board, defending on d6, but now white pushed the 5th gear with bishop to g5, attacking on the rook, and unfortunately that rook doesn't have any good space to hide. If rook to d7 then bishop to c6 is a very strong reply, so in the game, black played the move bishop to f6, which in fact turned out as a big time disaster. Well, before I move on, I'd like you to pause this video and find out a sequence where white immediately get a winning advantage. Let's see. The first move is very obvious, bishop captures f6, rook captures f6, and now this thematic move, queen to d4, pinning down the rook. The only good way to unpin this rook is queen to g7, but this allowed a nasty finish with rook to c7, and now that queen can no longer defend on f6. In the game, black tried the move bishop to d7, blocking the diagonal, but he got this rude shock. Boom! And funny enough, black loses a piece instantly with a completely hopeless position. Last but not least, now we are going to witness a game against the king side, which in fact, as per the database, is more common in this opening. e4, c5, c4, knight to c6, knight to c3, g6, g3, bishop to g7, bishop to g2, d6, knight g to e2. And instead of the last 2 games where black continued with e6, in this game, black continued with immediately rook to b8. Intention is very simple. He wants to play a6, b5, and grab every single space on the queen side. Well, no problem, white continued with castle on the king side, and after the move a6. If your opponent is playing on the queen side, we are more than happy to play on the king side, as if he's going to win there, probably he'll get a piece, but if he win on the king side, we will get the king. Black continued with bishop to d7, and I really like white's next move, which is in fact very common. Once you are concentrating on the queen side, it is very important to block your opponent's attack on the queen side, and accordingly, a4 is a fitting reply, stopping any expansion on the queen side. Well, black continued with the theoretical move, knight to d4, but this is not helping him as he's moving the same pieces twice. White's response is very obvious, d3, liberating the dark square bishop, and accordingly, black hurry up to castle on the king side with knight to f6. Now here bishop to e3 is not a good idea. The simple reason is, if your opponent has knight on f6 or f6, then he can kick our bishop with knight to g4. So that's why white find a very good idea. He continued with f5, sacrificing the pawn for a great attack on the king side. Well, black accepts the challenge and he takes this pawn. Afterwards, white reveals his trump, namely knight to f4. So as you can see, that knight is going on h5, where if allowed, then he will definitely take on the g7 bishop. Black played knight to c6, so his idea is very simple. When white played the move knight to h5, he is going to give this check, and after king to h8, he wants to play this furious move, knight to g4. So not only at this point black is a pawn up, but black has some threat going on, and it seems like white position doesn't have a punch after sacrificing a pawn. Well, sometimes the perception can be deceptive, And here, as the black king is stuck in the center, white is more than happy to do an exchange sacrifice with this beautiful move, e captures f5, creating a space for his minor piece. Obviously, black was more than happy as he continued with knight to f2, so white responds his force, white has to take this knight, and after bishop captures f2. Yes, indeed, black emerged with an exchange up, but just after a few moves, you can see the pitiable position for the black. Well, black fun has come to the end, and now, actually, it is white who is having all kinds of threats, starting with knight to d7. King to f8 is forced, afterwards, second forcing move, bishop to f6. Simple idea, if the king doesn't move, then knight to e6 will nab the queen, so in the game, black continue with king to g8, but after just one move, black resigns. So before I move on, last time guys, I'm asking you, pause this video and find out a move which forced black to instantly give up the game. Well, I hope you find this decisive blow. Bam! So white knight is attacking on the queen, and the funny thing is, queen cannot move, as after queen to g4, black king is a complete corner, and if black continue with grabbing this knight, then even that doesn't stop white, as queen to g4 leads to the mate. You want me to show you? Okay, let me do it very quickly. King to f7, queen to d7, king to e8, queen captures rook, king f7, queen g7 check, and the final move, yup, queen to f8. Good night, sweet keys to the black camp. That's it guys, with these 3 games, I hope you get enough confidence to play this line instantly in your own game. Well, apart from this, I have also included a database in the PGM which covered more games of this line. Well, thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment on this, and I'll meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care. So let's say here we start with the move c6, followed by the d6, queen goes to the c7 square, and meantime when white plays knight to f3, we are going to pin that knight with bishop to g4, then black can play knight to d7 and e5. Now these 2 moves can be alternate, so in some circumstances, black can play e5 first, followed by the knight to d7. Then the other knight goes to the f6 square, and bishop goes to the e7 square. And meantime, depending on how white has responded, black can choose his plan. So for example, if white has gone on the king side, then if you want to play a very strong positional game, you can castle on the same side, and then you can throw your queen side pawns up to the board. If the white has castle on the queen side, if you want to play safe, then this time you can go on the queen side, and you can look forward for the central break. And in either cases, if you want to play an aggressive game, then you can do an opposite side castle, and look forward for the opposite flank attack. So you can see it's a very versatile opening. Now every single opening has a pros and cons. For this opening, you should know before you play it. Now the plus side is, the black piece layout are very much fixed. That means you do not need to study opening theories, and you can churn out these moves very very quickly. The second good merit is, you are avoiding all the big traps, and the main trappy lines exist in regular openings. You can strongly look forward for an equal middle game, where the strong player will win. The downside is, you're giving white somewhat space in early stages, but nevertheless, you will slowly hit back in the middle game. Now, as usual, I'm going to show you some of my own game, which will give you an idea how you can play for the win in different positions. So, before we start, let me show you some of the traps exist in this opening. And the first trap which I want to show you happens in the Trumpovsky attack. So after white start with the move d4, respond with the c6, and it's the nature of Trumpovsky player that he or she will play bishop to g5 against any black opening. And here, we'll play a cunning move which is d6. Now, as per the normal theory of the Trumpovsky, the normal move over here is e3. But if your opponent is going to play e3 against this system, then this is the last time he's going to play, because this will simply lose a piece after queen check. And now you can see this pawn right now is stopping this bishop to come back. And just in the 4th move, we can win the one piece of the white. So there's one trap exists, especially in bishop to g5 line. Against our structure, white has to play a very very precise move. Even if he play one careless move, then he can lose the game very very easily. So let me show you one of my quickest win from this opening. My opponent plays d4 and I played with c6, and he responded with the classical system by the way, e4, d6, and knight c3, queen c7, knight f3. And please remember, whenever the knight f3 occurs, it's time for the bishop to g4 move. He played s3, and I dropped my bishop back, and then he played bishop to c4. Now I continue with normal piece development, so knight to d7, and after bishop to e3, I played e5. Here he responded with the g4, attacking my bishop drops back to the g6, and then he played queen to d2. And first it looks very obvious, but in fact this is a disaster move, because after black's next move, which is knight to f6, you can see the pressure is building up on the e pawn. Now the most natural move is bishop to d3, but my opponent thought that the bishop is sitting ideally on this diagonal. So my opponent decided to move his queen again with queen to d3 to protect that pawn. But this leads to losing a piece. Can you find it? Yep, it's d5. Please note, this right now e pawn is pinned, and if the bishop moves back, then black can simply grab this pawn, and that will fork the knight and the queen. In the game, my opponent captured this pawn, but after this following sequence, you can see black emerged with a clear piece up, and at this point my opponent resigned. So that is one of the quick game which I have won, and that highlighted that your opponent has to play a very very precise moves. Now let me show you some of the serious games in this line. In one of my game, when I played bishop to g4, my opponent responded with this move which is bishop to e2. Again, the normal piece development from the back, so mine is very natural. And here, my opponent grabbed the most space in the center, so he played d5. And there's no need to panic at this point, so you just need to carry out your normal piece development. So I played knight to f6, and then the usual line goes like this. So he castled, bishop to e7, and now he played h3, and my bishop dropped back to the h4. And after some thinking, my opponent decided here to capture my c pawn. And his idea is to pressurize my backward pawns on d and c. So next few moves are very logical. So he played queen to d2, plan is very simple, rook wants to come on the d5, where it can pressurize more that pawn. Anyways, I carried out normal piece development. So I first of all plays rook to d8, attacking the backward pawn, and after he defended, I castle on the king side. And after the normal move of the white, which is rook to d1, I played rook f to d8, and then he played e4, getting more space on the queen side, and here I played knight to f8. So playing is very simple. I'm just right now waiting for the right move. So I played my knight, which was not sitting ideally on d7, so I want to reroute that knight from f8 to e6, where it can look forward for the right movement to jump on either on d4 or f5. My opponent played knight to h2. Probably he wants to exchange my bishop, but I simply dropped my bishop back to g6. My two pieces are attacking the pawn. Here my opponent made the first small error, and he played bishop to d3. And very naturally that allow me to break through the center with this move, which is d5. More often, one mistake will follow with another one. So here my opponent captured the pawn, and normal move is recapturing the pawn, but instead of that, there's a one stronger move over here, which is bishop to d4, pinning the knight. Now the ideal move should be queen goes back to e1, and then again defend the knight with bishop to d2. But my opponent completely missed my next move, and he thought that he will stop my queen coming into the picture by playing this move, which is d6. So now you can see right now, my queen cannot have access of this file, but he completely overlooked this move, which is queen to e5. And now there's no way white can defend that knight. For the 3 or 4 moves have been played, white take the bishop, I recapture the knight, and after queen to d3, bishop captures knight, the game will last long. So this kind of errors can occur if your opponent does not play carefully. And as a strong middle game player, you can look forward for a very good middle game. So far, we were dealing with d4, e4. Now we are going to see one of my own game, which happens in d4, c4. So here my opponent responded with c4, and I'm going through the moves very, very quickly. You can see it's our normal piece developing, except there's one exception over here. White hasn't developed the knight over here. In this kind of scenarios, what you are going to do is you will change your move order slightly. So instead of bishop to g4 right now, we are going to wait for one move. So we are going to play knight to f6, and here my opponent played knight to f3, and then whenever the knight appears, it's time to pin the knight. And again the usual line continues. I can play bishop to e7, but instead of that, I prefer that bishop has a more suitable square, c5. So I decided to play bishop to c5, and my opponent defended the bishop with queen to d2. Then after some thinking, I decided to castle on. The simple reason is the rook has been arrived at the open file, where it can look forward for a discord attack to the queen. And the game goes on like this. So my opponent captured the bishop and recaptured the knight. Few moves are like this. And here, after some thinking, I grab that pawn. Sometimes people get afraid that you should not capture the pawn if you are specially done the opposite side castle. But here I don't see any tactics for the white. So I decided to grab the free lolly, and white responded with, of course, rook f to d1. And then I responded with knight to f4. And here he played this move, which is attacking my queen. So queen dropped back to c5. And here my opponent played knight to e4, which is outright mistake, because black can simply reply with this move, which is queen to f2. And now you can see the mate has been threatened. The only way to defend is bishop to d3. But after a very simple queen cross queen, bishop takes queen, and rook to d2, black has a tremendous initiative. And in fact, I won the game. Now, before concluding my video, I like to show you the most interesting game which I have played against the Fritz 12 with this system. And to my surprise, I found out that even Fritz cannot exploit this opening, at least for 50 moves. Moves are like this. So Fritz started with the move d4, and I started with a normal system. And here he played knight to c3, nevertheless, queen to c7, and it was a transposition to the classical opening of the white. And here, of course, bishop to g4. Fritz responded with h3, the bishop drops back, and then he played bishop to e2. I played knight to d7, and here he played e3. Nevertheless, it's time for the e5, and here bishop e3, then knight to f6, and then Fritz played knight to h4, so attacking my bishop. If I wish I can exchange that bishop, but I decided to protect my bishop, so I played bishop to g6, and here Fritz captured my bishop, and I captured the h pawn. So at least that gave me somewhat half-open h-file. Here the usual line continues with queen to d2, bishop to e7, and Fritz castle on the king side. Please note, as I mentioned in my earlier stage, that it's very important that if you want to play a positional game, then you should throw your queen side pawn, and this is the time to get some space on the queen side. So I played a5, and Fritz responded with rook f to d1, and then I simply castle on the king side, and then he played this move, which is rook goes back to e1, and then I played d4. So you can see it's a very easy plan to remember. All you need to do is push this guys up to the board. Fritz immediately stopped my queen side advancement with this move, which is d4, and then I played this move, which is d5, so attacking the center. Right now you can see the tension has been built up in the center, and here Fritz played d cross e5, and after some calculation I have gone through this sequence. So a cross b4, attacking the knight, so Fritz responded with a cross b4, and then I grabbed that pawn, so knight cross e5, and after queen to d4, I put my knight on a wonderful square, which is knight to c4, which has a merit of attacking that pawn, and here Fritz responded with e cross d4. I first of all grabbed the bishop pair, so knight cross e3, and after f cross e3, I first of all captured the rook, and after Fritz recaptured, I played knight cross d4, and after knight cross d4, c cross d4, Fritz played the first attacking move after the opening, which is rook to a7, and I simply put my queen on d6, bishop to f3, and I played first of all bishop to f6, gaining time on the queen, and after queen dropped back to d2, I played d4. And if somehow I can manage to exchange these pieces, then we have an opposite color bishop, and that leads to the draw game. And that exactly happened in the game, so I finally managed to draw the game, but I have to admit that I have done few takebacks, so that's what obviously because mighty Fritz. So you can see, by playing this way, even Fritz cannot exploit this opening immediately. I hope you enjoy and learn this wonderful system against the d4. Please try out in your game, and you'll slowly and gradually familiar with the different kind of situation. And all I can say is, it's a one kind of transposition to the middle game, where the stronger player will win the game. Please feel free to comment on my video, and I'll meet you soon. Bye. Gajah F5, dan gajah G5. Gajah 3. G6 membebaskan gajah G6. menyerang gajah. Jika gajah G6, gajah G5 start. Raja F8 dan rokade mengancam Royal Fort memenangkan menteri. Raja G8 dan D6 menyerang gajah. Pion makan pion dan E6. Jika pion makan pion, kuda makan pion menyerang menteri. Dan setelah menteri C8, menteri G4 menyerang kuda. Kuda D5 menyerang gajah dan jika kuda makan kuda kembali menyerang gajah. Namun benteng A ke C1 menyerang menteri. Menteri G8 dan gajah ke C4. Jika kuda makan gajah menyerang menteri, maka hitam akan langsung kalah setelah kuda F8 skat. Gajah F7 dan benteng makan gajah mengancam skat mat. Kuda makan menteri, benteng F6 skat. D5 dan gajah makan pion skat mat. Jika gajah ke C8, kembali gajah D5 skat. Gajah D7 dan gajah makan gajah skat. Menteri makan gajah. E6 menyerang menteri. Pion makan pion dan pion makan pion kembali menyerang menteri. Menteri D6 rokade. Rokade ke sayap menteri. Kuda ke D5 menyerang menteri. Menteri D5 benteng C1 menyerang pion di C7. C6 menteri G4 menyerang pion G. G6 dan gajah F4. Jika sekarang benteng F8 maka kuda makan pion skat mat. Langkah terbaik hitam adalah gajah ke D7. Dan setelah ini E6 menyerang gajah. Pion makan pion kembali menyerang gajah. Gajah C6 menteri G4 menyerang pion. Rokade dan rokade ke sayap menteri sekaligus mengancam serangan discovery dengan ancaman skat mat. Jadi kuda ke D5 menyerang gajah dan jika kuda ke F5 mengancam skat mat. Dan jika sendanya G6, kuda E6 skat, raja G7 dan gajah ke D2 mempertahankan perlindungan terhadap kuda. Dan sendanya kuda makan kuda, maka gajah makan kuda skat memenangkan menteri. Di posisi ini Grand Master Levin memilih benteng makan kuda dan menteri makan benteng. Setelahnya dia memutuskan untuk menawarkan pertukaran menteri dengan menteri F8. Tujuannya adalah untuk menetralkan tekanan putih. Grand Master Amatov membalas dengan benteng makan kuda. Jika menteri makan menteri, maka benteng makan menteri dan putih unggul perwira. Karena itu, gajah makan benteng dan kuda makan gajah. Kembali, jika menteri makan menteri, kuda makan gajah, Royal Fort dan putih akan unggul perwira. Hitam melanjutkan dengan kuda makan kuda. Dan setelah menteri makan kuda, putih unggul perwira dan hitam memutuskan untuk menyerah. Demikianlah video ini dan kita akan berjumpa di kesempatan berikutnya. Seperti yang kita tahu, pertahanan Petrov bisa dicapai setelah E4, E5, kuda F3 dan kuda ke F6. Ini adalah titik awal dari Petrov defense. Respon terbaik putih di posisi ini adalah kuda makan pion dan hitam memiliki 3 kemungkinan langkah. Jika menteri E7, D4 dan sesudah D6, kuda F3, menteri makan pion skat. Gajah E2, gajah F5 menyerang pion, kuda A3 melindungi pion dan D5 mengancam untuk mengeliminasi kuda dan memenangkan pion. Di sini putih harus rokade. Setelah gajah makan kuda, gajah ke D5 skat. C6 benteng E1 dan putih mendapatkan menteri. Jika kuda makan pion, menteri E2 dan setelah langkah terbaik hitam menteri E7, menteri makan kuda. D6, D4, pion makan kuda, pion makan pion dan putih unggul 1 pion. Kuda C6, F4, gajah G4 bersiap rokade ke sayap menteri guna memperkuat tekanan terhadap raja putih. Kuda C6 mengawal petak D1 dari kemungkinan serangan gajah dan benteng. Rokade dan gajah E3. G6, kuda D5 menyerang menteri. Menteri D7 dan kuda F6 kembali menyerang menteri dan juga gajah. Gajah F5 dan menteri A4 dengan rencana untuk menyerang kuda menggunakan gajah guna merusak struktur pion hitam di sayap menteri. Setelah menteri E6, gajah D5, gajah E7 dan gajah makan kuda. Menteri makan gajah, menteri makan menteri, pion makan menteri. C3, gajah makan kuda, pion makan gajah menyerang pion. Raja D7, raja ke F2, benteng D6 menyerang pion dan gajah D4. Setelah benteng A ke D8, D4 dan putih unggul 1 pion bersih dengan posisi yang superior. Langkah terbaik hitam di posisi ini adalah D6 dan kuda ke F3. Setelah kuda makan pion, D4, gajah E7 bersiap rokade, gajah D3 menyerang kuda. Gajah F5 rokade, rokade, benteng E1 dan D5. Di sini putih harus memainkan C4